The bell above the cafe door jingled, though no one really needed it. I was already halfway to the counter, eyes fixed on the worn wooden floor, tracing the patterns of spilled sunlight. My usual table by the window was empty, the chair across from me untouched, except for the faint imprint of someone else's presence. Crumbs, a pressed-down corner of the cushion. I barely noticed her at first. She moved through the cafe like she owned the quiet, though she probably didn't. Mid-40s, sharp sweater, scarf tucked just so, hair the kind of silvered brown that catches light in unexpected ways. She ordered her coffee, black, no sugar, exactly how she liked it. And my stomach did that weird little twist you get when you notice someone paying attention to the world in a way you secretly admire. I sipped my drink slowly, pretending to check my phone, though nothing was there, just a half-written text I'd saved and never sent. I like to linger over messages like that, letting the words cool before deciding if they were worth sending, if anyone was really worth the risk. She glanced toward the window, and our eyes met for a fraction longer than necessary. Not awkward. There was a softness in her gaze, a curiosity, like she'd already figured out I'd been staring. My eyes flicked down, pretending to tie my shoelace, but my mind refused to stop replaying that moment. When she came over with her tray, the noise of the cafe seemed to shrink around us. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, tilting her head toward the chair across from me. "No. Go ahead," I said, and I meant it, though my voice had that unsure edge you get when you're trying not to seem too interested. She sat, sliding the cup across the table toward her, and I noticed the way she held the rim with 2 fingers, gently, almost absent-mindedly. I'd never really thought about how someone could carry a cup with intention until that moment. "I've seen you here before," she said, as if mentioning something trivial. "You always order the same thing. Black coffee, right?" "Yeah," I said, nodding, trying not to sound too eager. "And you, black, no sugar?" She smiled just slightly. Not wide, not warm, but something thinner, quieter, like sunlight through blinds. "Impressive memory," she murmured. The conversation slipped into silence after that, but not an uncomfortable one. We were both aware of each other, letting small gestures speak, my hand tapping lightly on the table, her eyes scanning the room but occasionally landing on mine. A fleeting half-smile when our arms brushed while reaching for sugar packets. I caught myself staring again, more openly this time, and she leaned closer, voice dropping just below a whisper. "Like what you see?" My throat went dry. I laughed quietly, a little too fast, and she didn't wait for my answer. She sipped her coffee, eyes locked on mine anyway, and I felt the space between us expand and contract at once, like a pulse I hadn't noticed until it was already beating in my chest. When she finally got up, setting the empty cup down, she lingered for a second. "See you around," she said, tilting her head, a question embedded in the tone. I nodded, watching her leave, and for some reason, I didn't feel the urge to text anyone. Not yet. Just the quiet weight of her presence lingering in the room, and a thought I couldn't shake. I wanted to see her again. And then my phone buzzed, startling me. A text from an unknown number. For simple words, "Coffee tomorrow? 10. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. The gallery smelled faintly of turpentine and old paper, sunlight slicing across the polished wooden floor. I was stacking a few canvases near the back when she appeared in the doorway, holding a sketch pad and a mug that looked suspiciously like mine from yesterday. "Hey," she said, voice low. "Thought I'd check if you survived the morning rush." "Barely," I muttered, stacking one frame on top of another. My fingers hesitated on the edge of a canvas, brushing lightly, like I was measuring the moment instead of finishing the task. She moved closer, tilting her head to look at the paintings lined up against the wall. "You're good at noticing things," she said. Not a compliment exactly, more a statement of fact. Her eyes lingered on a piece with rough charcoal lines. "I drew that when I was, I don't know, maybe your age? 21. It's terrible, but I liked it." I laughed quietly, shaking my head. "No, I think it's honest. Better than most stuff I've seen from people my age." Her eyes met mine then, for longer than necessary, and I felt something tighten in my chest. I wanted to say something, anything, but my tongue felt glued. Instead, I fiddled with a corner of a print, pulling it a little too hard, trying to focus on the work. I shouldn't tell you this, she said, voice dropping. I've been divorced for a while. Not that it matters. She shrugged, like it might, but shouldn't. I nodded, trying not to let my mind wander too far. But it did. I pictured weekends together I shouldn't imagine, coffee cups pressed between our hands, quiet confessions spilling across the table. I pushed it down, letting my eyes sweep the room instead, noting the tiny dust motes in sunlight, the slight tilt of a frame that bothered me more than it should. We moved in tandem around the small gallery, neither of us speaking much. I passed her a box of charcoal pencils, and our fingers brushed. Not a handhold, not even a grab, just a fleeting touch that lingered in the memory longer than the seconds it actually lasted. She poured tea into 2 chipped mugs from the counter. The steam rose between us, curling like smoke from a quiet, shared secret. We sat on the worn couch, back straight, knees almost touching. Silence settled. Not empty, heavy but alive. Do you ever stop thinking about your work? She asked suddenly. Or do you take it home? I hesitated. Sometimes, I admitted. But mostly it waits for me here. Like it knows I'll only notice it when I have time. She nodded, eyes on her mug, fingers tracing the rim. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. I wanted to say something clever, but nothing came. Instead, I shifted closer, enough for the armrest to press gently against hers. She glanced at me, and her eyes lingered, soft but questioning. Then she tapped my hand lightly, almost on accident, and smiled again. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The gallery smelled faintly of wet paint and dust, the late afternoon sun slanting across the floor in sharp rectangles. I was arranging small prints when I felt her behind me. Do you want to look at the new pieces? She asked, a little too casual, her voice soft but edged with something I couldn't name. I nodded, keeping my hands busy, though I felt my pulse pick up. She moved close, brushing past me, and I almost caught her sleeve. Almost. My throat tightened. We circled the small room, leaning over canvases, her fingers tracing the edges as if she couldn't help herself. I wanted to say something, stop, don't, but the words got lost in my chest. Then the bell above the door rang. Not a customer, just my friend, Julian, dropping by, humming and holding a tote bag. Oh hey, I said quickly, stepping back. She stepped back too, but a little slower than she should have, and I caught the faint look in her eyes, a flicker of amusement, irritation. Julian waved, oblivious. Got time for a coffee later? He lingered, looking between us like he sensed something. I shrugged, muttered something about being busy. Julian left. The quiet returned, but now heavier. We moved to the corner with the small couch, sitting down. Not close, not far, just in that tense space where proximity teased memory and possibility. You're quiet today, she said. Her fingers fiddled with the edge of her mug. I noticed the way her knuckles pressed the ceramic, tight. I just thinking, I said. Not a lie. Thinking how her hair caught the light. How her voice had a rough edge when she spoke softly. How much I wanted to reach out, but couldn't. She looked up. A long pause. Something in her eyes, curiosity, doubt, maybe a warning. She leaned a little forward, close enough for me to notice the faint perfume, the warmth radiating from her body. I inhaled. Then she stopped. Shifted. I should check the studio, she said, voice careful. Not leaving, not staying. We both knew what wasn't being said. I wanted to reach for her hand, to ask, something, anything, but my fingers froze. Instead, I moved a pencil closer to her, sliding it across the table. Our fingers brushed briefly. Too brief. A spark anyway. Her gaze lingered. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Leaned back. A little laugh, nervous, quiet. My chest tightened. I imagined her leaning closer. Leaning enough. Close enough too, but she left. Just like that. Walking toward the studio, back straight, scarf brushing the edge of the doorway. I stayed on the couch, staring at the pencil we'd touched, thumb tracing the small mark of her fingertips. Almost. I almost reached for her. And I didn't. We left the gallery later than usual, sunlight turning the streets gold, long shadows stretching across the pavement. She walked a few steps ahead, hands in her coat pockets, and I noticed how the light caught the silver in her hair. I wanted to reach for it. Wanted to tell her. Do you ever think about someone too much? I asked, voice low, almost swallowed by the evening hum. She glanced at me, a fraction of a smile playing on her lips. Sometimes, she said, slow, careful. Then, after a pause, but thinking isn't dangerous. Not always. I laughed softly, but it didn't reach my eyes. My chest felt tight, like the words I wanted to say were lodged there. Sometimes I wonder if it's more than just thinking, I admitted. She stopped mid-step, turning toward me. The street was empty, except for the echo of our steps and a distant siren. She folded her arms, tucking her scarf tighter around her neck, and I realized she was measuring me. Measuring herself. I shouldn't feel this way, she said quietly, almost to herself. I shouldn't. Her voice caught, and she shook her head. It's complicated. I wanted to tell her it wasn't wrong. I wanted to tell her it was inevitable, that I'd been thinking the same thing, that I'd been imagining it. How close we could be, how it might feel to cross the line and not pull back. But I didn't. Instead, I folded my hands in front of me, fingers tight around each other. I tried to focus on the sound of her boots on the pavement, the faint clink of a café door swinging somewhere behind us. Anything that could distract me from the ache of wanting. She looked up, eyes catching mine, searching. Have you ever regretted noticing someone? She asked. A small question, soft, almost invisible. I don't think I can answer that, I said honestly. And I didn't. Not really. Because noticing her was the first thing I'd done in months that felt real. Alive. Terrifying. Too much. We kept walking, side by side now, closer than before, but not close enough. Our shoulders brushed, and it lingered in that way that leaves your skin tingling long after. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words evaporated before they reached my lips. She stopped at a bench outside a bookstore, glancing at the open notebook she carried. I should write, she said, soft, distant. Process it, whatever this is. I wanted to ask her to stay, to tell her she didn't have to process it alone. But I only nodded, lips tight. My thumb brushed the edge of the bench absent-mindedly, imagining her hand there, warm, and too soon I felt the pull of restraint, the gravity of the line we hadn't crossed. She turned toward me, eyes unreadable, voice almost a whisper. Do you ever wonder if some things are worth the risk? I didn't answer. Not yet. My chest ached. My fingers curled into the cold wood of the bench. And I knew, whatever I said next, whatever I did next, it could change everything. I walked past the gallery that morning, expecting the familiar clink of the doorbell, the faint smell of turpentine and coffee. But it was silent. Empty. Her car wasn't there. My chest tightened, an odd, hollow weight. I checked my phone. No text. Nothing. Not even a hint. Usually, she'd send a quick message, running late, or coffee later. But today, nothing. I waited, staring at the glass door, the reflections of trees trembling in the morning light. A small notebook lay on the counter inside, half open, pages fluttering. I recognized her handwriting, looping and careful. She'd been here, just not for me. When she finally appeared, she looked different. Faster, sharper, more guarded. She greeted me, but her voice was clipped, eyes avoiding mine. Morning, she said. And that was it. The warmth I had felt, her glances, the quiet laughs, the shared silence, was gone. She moved past me with purpose, carrying a stack of prints, not letting our fingers brush even accidentally. Busy day? I asked, trying to sound casual, hoping she'd slip, maybe meet my gaze, something. Yeah, a lot, she said. Appointments. Her eyes flicked to the floor. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't telling the truth either. I wanted to ask about what? Her ex-husband, her weekend with her kid, the reason she was suddenly so distant, but the words lodged in my throat. I watched her set up the display, careful, precise, deliberate. Every movement a wall between us. I lingered longer than necessary, trying to find a crack, a moment where she'd meet me halfway. But the smile that once tugged at her lips, the glance that lingered too long, had vanished. She talked quietly on the phone, laughing in small, polite bursts, but never at me. By the time I left, I hadn't said a word. I hadn't even moved a chair closer to hers. The gallery smelled the same, the sunlight slanting the same, but everything had shifted. I felt the space between us like a cold draft through the cracks of a door. That evening, my phone lit up. A draft message I never sent stared back at me. I miss you. Did I do something wrong? I typed it, paused, deleted it. My thumb hovered over the send button too long. Couldn't. Shouldn't. I walked past the cafe on the way home. The chair I always chose was empty. The barista didn't recognize me. The window reflected my face, tired and unsure, like I'd been waiting for something that never arrived. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. I stared at my phone again, thumb resting above the screen, imagining her walking past it, wondering if I'd text, wondering if I'd waited too long. And then I turned it off, slipping it into my pocket. The day ended without closure. The gallery closed without her glance. I walked home in silence, the memory of her hand on mine, so fleeting, echoing louder than anything spoken. And I knew tomorrow, or maybe the day after, I'd have to face the same quiet question. Would she return the way she had, or had the pause stretched into something longer, unspoken, unfixable? It was late evening when she opened the door. The hallway smelled faintly of rain and the faint bleach of her hallway tiles. I hadn't expected her, and for a moment, the apartment felt too small, too quiet for both of us. "Hey," she said, voice low, almost cautious. I noticed the way her hands lingered on the doorframe, gripping it lightly, as if bracing herself. "Hi," I said. My hands were shoved into my pockets, fingers curling around the edges, unsure if I should move closer or stay put. We didn't sit at first. We just stood there, facing each other, the space between us tense and alive. Her eyes were searching, and I could feel the question there, unspoken. "What now?" I don't want to mess this up," she said finally. Not a declaration, just a breath out. "I know," I murmured. I wanted to say more. Everything I'd rehearsed over weeks. The words, the confessions, the half-formed dreams, collapsed into a quiet honesty. I want to be here. With you. If that's okay." She swallowed. Her lips pressed together for a moment, and I saw her weighing every consequence. The age gap, the distance between our lives, the careful routines we'd both built. And still, she didn't step back. "Okay," she said soft, almost a whisper. Not a victory, not a surrender, just an acknowledgement. We moved to the small kitchen. I poured 2 glasses of water, and we sipped without talking. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint patter of rain on the window, became the backdrop to something neither of us had named aloud but both understood. Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for the sugar jar. A fleeting touch, but enough to make me pause, enough to make my chest squeeze with quiet intensity. "You make it easier to notice the small things," I said finally, almost to myself. She looked at me then, and something shifted in her expression. Not a smile exactly, but relief, recognition, a tiny softening around the edges. "And you make me remember things I didn't think I'd forgotten," she replied, voice calm but heavy with everything unsaid. We lingered in the kitchen doorway, neither of us moving forward or back, just existing in that fragile equilibrium. My thumb brushed the back of her hand as she rested it against the counter. "Okay," she said again, this time with a little more warmth. I nodded. "Okay." No grand gestures. No sudden movement. Just 2 people acknowledging the risk, the cost, the quiet intensity of wanting something they weren't supposed to, and deciding it was worth staying. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension ease, not gone, just present in a softer way. The world outside could wait. We stayed there for a moment longer, hands barely touching, breathing in rhythm with the quiet apartment. That was enough. Months later, the gallery smelled of rain and old paper again, but the tension that had once lingered in the corners was gone. She moved among the canvases, scarf loosely draped, hair catching the light in the same way I remembered, and I watched from the doorway. Noticing her, truly noticing her, felt ordinary now. Comfortable. Our routines had settled into an easy rhythm. Coffee at 8:47 a.m., black for her, black for me. Shared silences over tea in chipped mugs, the way our elbows brushed at the counter. Small things we hadn't noticed before became markers of belonging. Yesterday, we'd walked past the old bench outside the bookstore. She paused, tracing a scratch along the worn wood. I didn't ask what she was thinking. I didn't need to. I just waited, hands tucked into my pockets, heart light with quiet certainty. She smiled, soft, unforced. That glance said more than any words could. There were still pauses in our conversations, silences that carried the weight of our past. Missteps, almost confessions, days when we'd wondered if it was worth the risk. But now, those pauses felt like punctuation, not walls. We had learned the rhythm of each other. She left me a note on the kitchen counter that morning, a single line, "Coffee tomorrow?" I laughed quietly, shaking my head, folding the napkin she'd left under the mug. I didn't need to text back. She'd already know the answer. Evenings often found us in the same quiet corner of the gallery, fingers brushing over frames, hands reaching for a cup, sharing stories that weren't necessary but somehow unavoidable. We laughed softly over small mistakes. Her mislaid sketches, my half-empty cups, the way we both pretended not to notice the tiny dust motes dancing in sunlight. I realized, as I watched her lean against the counter, eyes following a line of charcoal on a canvas, that this ease, this ordinary warmth, was more than I'd hoped for. Not a perfect love, not a sudden declaration, just two people who had noticed each other fully, risked the pause, and stayed. When she glanced at me, I saw the reflection of all our near moments. The brush of fingers, the unsent texts, the quiet confessions, and I felt it all fold into one soft certainty. A life measured in gestures, in shared mornings, in quiet understanding. I took her hand briefly, just enough to hold it, not needing more. She smiled, thumb brushing the back of my hand, a small acknowledgement that said everything. And in that moment, I understood love wasn't a flash or a climax. It was the accumulation of noticing, staying, and returning. I let my eyes drift back to the sunlight on the floor, thinking of the bench, the tea, the black coffee, the times we almost paused, and I realized I wouldn't trade any of it. Just this, a quiet, earned togetherness. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?